Greetings, everybody. Welcome to BeerNet Radio. This is your host, Harry, coming at you from the Hotel del Coronado in San Diego, where we just wrapped up our Beer, Wine, and Spirits Summit. We are just about to head back home, so we didn't have time to record a podcast this week, but you know what we're going to do? We're going to give you a sneak peek of some of the content of the Beer Summit, and here is at least part of my conversation with Constellation President Beer Division, Jim Sabia. Ladies and gentlemen, if you'll take your seat, we'll get this party started. I hope everybody got some rest last night. Everybody looks pretty fresh. Thank you to whoever gave me the THC beverage. I slept like a baby. Thank you, Jake Hill. At the end, at the reception tonight, you spoke and we listened, and our crack staff found, I think, the last space heaters on the island, and so we will have heaters, and we're going to roll out the TV again for the game at the reception tonight. Yes, thank you. Shout out to Jessica Lopez and Millicent Ryan, who put on this entire show. A lot of people farm that out. We do it in-house. Thank you, Jessica and Millicent. There he is. I'd like to invite Jim Sabia to the stage. Jim is EVP and President of Constellation Beer Division, and he's been in the business for a long time. This is not his first time on this stage, but hopefully it won't be his last. Come on up, Jim. I've got a beer for you. Come sit.
Thank you.
It's a little early, but
I'll say
work
reward.
We're just miles from Tijuana, so this is how we do it in Mexico. Cheers.
Cheers.
Good Lord.
That's good.
I don't know what you charged for that, but it ain't enough. All right. Well, thank you for being here.
Yeah,
I appreciate it. I'm sure it's good to get out of Chicago at the moment.
Yes.
So you've been doing this a long time, Jim, and I think that's one of the reasons for Constellation's success is that there's not a lot of churn at Constellation. But the beer industry has changed, and so you've had to adapt. And so my first question is, how has beer marketing changed from your perspective from the days of just peddling Corona?
I think the fundamentals of marketing really haven't changed, quite frankly, Harry. I think what we try to do is take a brand like Corona, Modelo, Pacifico, Victoria, and really spend a lot of time and energy trying to find what is the essence of that brand, right? You think about Modelo Especial, and the story I tell all the time is about 13 years ago when I joined the beer division, I went out to the Mission in California, San Francisco, and we saw the unacculturated Mexican Hispanics, drinking Modelo. So we were like, this brand that nobody really knows about is, remember being in a meeting with an agency, and it's like a fighter brand, right? And we said, oh my gosh, this is a brand with the fighting spirit for those that have the fighting spirit. So, we knew we were onto something because it was the essence of Modelo, the way Corona has the essence of kind of this beach state of mind. And I think once you spend the time and energy and find that essence, then it's a matter of developing the assets, right? And I think we do a pretty good job of connecting with consumers emotionally, right? I think our advertising over the years has been very emotive. It's rational based, but it's very emotive. So what's changed, I think, in marketing recently over the last number of years is the fragmentation of media, right? It used to be where you used to worry so much about going to your GNS or your national sales meeting as a marketer, and you were judged on like 5 to 7 to 10 TV commercials. And I tell you what, back in the day, I worked on Keystone 1 year, and I was the director, and I made film. Bill Weintraub was the CMO at the time. It was terrible, terrible advertising.
Really?
And it took me like a year to redeem myself. So it was really hard to, back in those days, you had like this big Super Bowl event and you had to make these commercials and then basically you were getting ready for next year. Now it's constant. You're constantly making creative. We're starting to use generative AI, and it's really changing. And then you think about the media channels. You think about all the media channels, social, digital, streaming, linear. I mean, that's, I think, probably the biggest change. And we're going after smaller and smaller cohorts. Yeah. You know, like college football playoffs, you know, the Michigan versus Alabama, I think it was 32 million households. That's a big number. Yeah. So you still have those events where if you can participate as a brand, there's a lot of folks that can see your message, understand your brand. But the fragmentation of media, you know, from a marketing perspective is probably the biggest change from 10, 15, 20 years ago.
Right. And does that translate to, you know, in the old days when you activated a brand, it was, you know, the POS in the store, signage. Now it seems to be more toward digital, trade media, that sort of thing. You guys, it seemed to be, you've built a pretty good digital media apparatus to both address the consumer but also address the retailer.
Yeah, we have a consumer marketing tech stack that's all our first party data that we understand, like who to serve, what kind of commercials, whether we use Pacifico for San Diego versus Dallas. You know, that's all critically important. We have this first party data, and I'm sure others do too. However, retail, right? Retail is critical. It truly is critical. If you think about some of our success this past year, you know, is part of, you know, the features and displays we're getting. Because when it comes to retail, and I heard some of the panel yesterday of the retailers, for us, it's all about velocity per point of distribution, right? We have 150 SKUs. That's it.
They're very small.
Right? That is $54 million per SKU. You know, our nearest competitor is 10 times the amount of SKUs as we have, and it's about $10 million per SKU. So we're very, very careful when we work with retailers, when we work with our distributors. Think about the efficiency too with our distributor network, right? Where they're putting pallets on trucks, you know, not, you know, a couple of cases here, a couple of cases here, and thinking about picking through their warehouses to picking pallets up. So retail, whether it's retail trade marketing, like college football playoffs, for example. Modelo Especial is the official beer of college football players. Well, our distributor network did an amazing job of getting on the floor, right, with the POS and all that. So it's still, retail marketing is extremely important, you know, as it always has been.
Right. I heard, I don't know where I read or heard this, but I heard that Constellation was the best at actually getting the right image and the right price on, you know, like Instacart and you know, those little things that you don't really think about. But if a consumer sees the wrong image with the wrong package that they're trying to buy,
absolutely, yep,
it kills the sale. Yeah,
we spend a lot of time on digital shelf, working with Instacart, working with all those third-party platforms to make sure when you're searching for, you know, beer, you get search words, and Mexican beer search words. So that's basically another kind of media trade type channel.
Right. Okay, and do you still run that Corona Christmas ad?
30 years.
30 years, the same ad. There's a lesson right there.
Absolutely. Right.
Don't get rid of an ad but wasn't there a beach ad where the guy was throwing his pager into the water?
Yes.
And then you just redigitized it to a cell phone?
Well, yes, we did. And this is
reusing media, folks.
I started with beer with Constellation in 2009, right? It was February 2009. And we had our national meeting, right, coming up, and I needed a year to get organized on, okay, what am I going to do here? So I went back and I looked at all the previous film that the previous folks have developed, and that was one of the iconic ads. So naturally, we wanted to throw a beeper, so we digitized it. And it brought us a year to get organized on, okay, what are we going to do with Corona? You know, because people literally said to us, yeah, I really like Corona, but I only drink Corona when I'm on the beach. And like, that's a problem. Yeah. Right? I mean, it's wonderful being out here on the beach, but you know, you live in Chicago, New York, you know, beaches. So what we did was we bought a year and we developed a campaign of Find Your Beach, right? And we showed people enjoying Corona all over the place. So it wasn't physically a beach, it was more of a mental state of mind. what's your beach? How do you get from here to here emotionally? Right. So it bought us some time, and it worked for us.
It seemed that the Find Your Beach seemed very strategic at the time, but I remember that there was a lot of, particularly distributors, worried about that pivot, and obviously it turned out well. But so let's, there's people out here saying that Pacifico could be the next Modelo Especial. How is that progressing as it gets, awareness outside of the West Coast?
Well, you said yesterday that there may be a theme coming out of this, convention here, the seminar summit, and the theme is kind of discipline and focused. Right. I mean, I'd be very frank with you, probably the biggest benefit we have as Constellation is that our core brands are healthy. Yep. Right? If you think about Modelo Especial growing high single digits, Corona's growing, Pacifico's growing double digits, Familiar's growing. We have a great portfolio, a very small portfolio, 5 families, but they're growing, right? So when your core is growing, because every year you get an annual plan, right? You got to hit top line, bottom line, everything in between, and we got to generate. We said at the Investor Day we're going to generate about 100 million cases over the next 5 years. So 20 million per year is our floor. So with that, we're allowed to really and because Modelo is strong, Modelo almost 200 million cases, even if it grows 5%, you're generating 10 million. So now you need another 10 million to hit your goal. With that, you take a brand like Pacifico that, Dean and his team out here in San Diego are doing an incredible job where I think it's number 2 and number 3 beer brand out here. But we're starting to move east, right? We went to Denver, doing well. We went up to Seattle, doing well. But we're taking our time. We're being very disciplined. Because a couple of years ago, we ran down to Florida with 24-ounce cans, probably about 6-7 years ago. And we said, we're going to go to Florida. There's beaches in Florida. Pacifico lifestyle is perfect for that beach. After about a year, the retailers kicked us out because the VPO wasn't there. So we said, okay, we have to slow down a little bit. We have to stay out west, and we got to slowly move to the east. And with that, as we move to the east, now we're doing a lot in Dallas, in Houston, right? We're not going with 10, 15 SKUs. We're literally going with like 4 or 5. So now you talk to the retailer and you put in Pacifico, and the velocity per point, it's like, wow, this is moving. I'll take another SKU. Right. So 7 ounce, right? We only have, like I said, 5 or 6 SKUs. So can Pacifico be a lot bigger? Absolutely. We have a lot of energy for it. We think it's a great brand, the emotional connection we have with that Gen Z consumer. It's that lifestyle, but it's not going to happen in the next 3 to 5 years, quite frankly. It's going to be, we believe, 7, 10, 12. This is one of the brands we have that if we nurture it properly, it's going to be a big brand. Because, I always tell this story about, the color and the graphics, right, on this brand. That was developed by somebody 1900. Somebody had the creative ability to say, we're going to get this brand from Mazatlan, right? And we're going to make it yellow. And we're going to put an anchor in the middle, and we're going to have this font. Right. It's like, wow. Yeah. That's pretty impressive. So yeah. It's hard to do, and they did an amazing job 120-something years ago. Right.
So it seems to me that what's a theme that's emerging here is discipline and focus, and not just chasing what after the next new thing. One of the things that distributors love about you, other than your brands are growing, is your discipline with SKUs. And I think that was one of the themes yesterday, that there's just line extensions are coming out too quick and fast. From Mary Guyver, she was very clear about that, I think. So, how do you go about deciding how to line extend and and how far to extend a brand?
Well, as we talk about SKUs, right? It's all about, we look at the VPO. You look at, okay, what does the consumer want? What does the retailer want? So as you take Modelo, as you take Pacifico, as you take Victoria, you do that, in terms of SKUs. When we think about line extending a brand, and I think Modelo is a great example where, it was like 13 years ago, we introduced Modelo Chelada, right? tomato-based, one SKU, a 24-ounce can. And 13 years later, we're up to 20 million cases, growing double digits, and now we have 6 flavors of single serve, and we have now variety packs, Limone Sol, we got another variety pack. So then we are coming out this year with Modelo Agua Frescas, which is out here in California or in Mexico, the big jugs of juice, and it's going to be nitrogen. We said we want to make the mouth feel like it is in Mexico with the liquid. But the thing about, when you think about Modelo, what we're introducing, line extending Modelo, is very authentically Mexican.
Right.
So as you can imagine, we had a lot of debates on introducing Modelo Oro. Right? Is it authentically Mexican? However, with that brand, again, we tested it. We do a really good job with our line extensions of our major brands on testing and learning. Right. Because we don't want to come out nationally with 5 SKUs and, go spend $50 million on media, tell our wholesalers this is the #1 MBO for the month, and you go out there, and then a year later you're like, oh, what happened? So we test and learn. We pick usually 3 or 4 markets, and we drill deep into those markets to understand what the consumer, what the retailer, what everybody's doing. Then we decide. And that's what we saw with Oro. With Oro, we only came out with a 24-ounce can and a 12-pack. Right? So then you go to the retailer and say, well, how's it doing? Well, the VPO is really good, right? And it's going A, B, C, and D.
And pretend like I'm new here. What is a VPO?
I'm sorry, velocity per point of distribution, right?
Got it.
So it's all that space, and we have a lot of conversations about the fall space we've picked up, which we think is about 8 to 10. The spring, we think about 10%. So with Oro, with only having 2 SKUs, the VPO, the velocity per point of distribution, was really good. Yeah. So now we said, oh, great, now we're going to come out with 18s and 24 packs. And the retailer reception has been very, very positive, because now going from basically a single serve 24-ounce can with a 12-pack on shelf, now we get to have an 18 and a 24, and now we're starting to build some blocking. Right. So it's that approach, but it goes back to what I said earlier on the fact that, look, we're very fortunate. We've worked hard, right? So it hasn't been handed to us. But we're very, very fortunate that our core brands are very healthy.
Right.
It allows us to be patient. It allows us to be disciplined.
Right. Because I think a lot of folks forget that it's not how much beer you sell, it's how much beer is drunk. And meaning it's not sold when it gets to the retailer. It's sold when the retailer sells it to the consumer. And you can build all the displays you want, but if they're not buying it, it's a problem. I talked a little bit yesterday. I noted that Michelob Ultra is the largest brand by volume, at least in supermarkets. It seems like, and then Modelo is like number 5. It's clear #1 in C-stores. Is that what channels of trade do you think Modelo has the most run room?
Like you said, convenience, we're doing exceptionally well. Food, we're doing better and better every day. You don't look at on-premise. In terms of draft, we're the 5th largest draft brand, right? #1 beer by revenue, but 5th largest draft. Huge opportunity there. But when we think about Modelo, and I was talking to some of our analysts, I've been answering this question now for about 5 years, and the question is, how much runway does Modelo have?
Right.
And it's like, guys, we always say, it's not the analysts are very supportive, it's more the buy side saying, okay, what's the runway? What's the runway? And we've had, as a Constellation, 55 consecutive quarters of growth, right? So we've been growing 13, 14 years. But the runway for Modelo Especial is not, yes, of course it's grocery, of course it's on premise, it's a lot of different stores. It's more regionally based, right? If you think about, California, right? We have Modelo Especial in California has like a 20 share. We're doing exceptionally well in Dallas now. We're #1 beer in 13 markets with Modelo Especial, and #2 in about 6 more. But if you look at it, right, if you look east, in New York, Corona's #1, Modelo's #2. In Miami, Corona's #1, Modelo's #2. So as Modelo begins to move, like from Chicago, Dallas, Houston, as it's moving east, and you think about the Northeast, you think about Florida, you think about in North Carolina and Raleigh, it's #1. So the brand is starting to move from kind of the Midwest into the Southeast part, Northeast. So that whole part of the country I mean, one of the benefits we got this past year was simply the awareness that Modelo Especial is the #1 beer in America. People are like,
Right.
what's that brand?
Yeah.
Modelo Especial?
Right.
You'd be surprised how many people have unaided awareness, and that's when you ask consumers, when think about beer, what do you think about? And it's open-ended. And it's getting better and better every year, but the big jump we got from awareness was, mainstream media, CNN, all this mainstream media talking about Modelo Especial, #1 beer in America.
Right.
I mean, you can't buy that advertising.
Right.
So we think the runway for Modelo is absolutely, we have a long runway. We're going to go into the Midwest, into the Southeast, up in the Northeast. So there's a lot of opportunity left for us with Modelo.
Right, that's interesting. I mean, we get kind of trained to think of what the opportunity is in channels and accounts, but region, this is a huge country. Really, it's not a country. It's 50 different countries. I don't know where I'm going with that, but so if you guys have questions for Jim, just pass them to the aisles, and I'd be happy to ask them. You've said that you want to add another 100 million cases over the next 5 years. Walk us through how's that possible? And I guess you kind of just described a little bit of that, but what do other brands have a play in that? What else do you have?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about Modelo, just assume easy math. It's 200 million. It grows 5%. You got 10 million there. You got Pacifico at 20 million, grows 10%. Pick up 2. Michelada, pick up 20 million. Pick up 10. You got 2. So we think there's a good path, absolutely. The biggest driver we have, quite frankly, still to this day, is distribution. Now, for Modelo Especial in California, it's more about space, right? I mean, some of these markets where we do have a lot of distribution, simple and effective, it's about incremental space, shopper first shelf we're doing, right? So that's a big part of it. So distribution and space is a huge percentage of our future growth. However, what we have a lot is the demographic tailwinds, right? The Hispanic consumer, right? It's critical to our business. They're over about 55% of our volume. They're still 30% of our growth, and we have the opportunity that back to the core being healthy. They love beer and they drink a lot of beer. So now we can take our time and do some more things with the general market consumer. So
Right.
now we're crossing over with keeping our Hispanic consumer and then having the general market consumer. So that's a tailwind for us. And innovation, as we talked about, innovation is critical. We're going to continue to test and learn. We're going to continue to do more with innovation. And we have emerging brands team testing some flavored malt beverages. But where it's critically important for us is that if our master brands are healthy, right? Like Corona's healthy, Modelo's healthy, we can line extend. Because it's so much easier to introduce a line extension off of your master brand than introduce a new to the world brand. It just takes so much time and energy and money to get that going.
Right. I don't know if you remember this, but you, me, and Bill Hackett.
Oh, God.
You came to San Antonio, and we were sitting at a restaurant at the bar, and Bill looked at the Dos Equis tap, and he's like, you know what, Harry, don't print this, but we're bringing out draft. And I remember saying, that is the worst idea in the world. I was like, do not do it. It's a pain in the ass. The kegs go both ways, right? Dunnage and all this. And boy, I was wrong. I had no idea Modelo Especial.
Oh, it was at the same time there. I always tell Robert Ottenstein this too, when I told him that we're going to start advertising in English language TV. He said, you're crazy.
Right.
I said, well, we're going to be careful. He says, yes, as long as you're careful. And that was another thing about Modelo, right? I mean, we were Spanish language only, and all of a sudden we started advertising in general market. So we were nervous too about that, right? Because we didn't know what was going to happen, but we just took our time and we did it well. And draft, to your point, draft is so critical for this brand and Pacifico.
Right.
It's awareness, right?
Right. Well, I mean, you kind of just Dos Equis got it by default for so many years because there really wasn't another Mexican draft beer. So, this is from the audience. Do you believe in brand life cycles? Boy, we've been fielding this question for a long time.
Sean from New Belgium said, you don't have tired brands, you have tired brand managers. Yeah. And that's a great quote. I always tell my team, I think came from some CMO I worked for, but brands don't have life cycles, brand managers do. Right. And I used to tell my team that all the time. That went over well.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you may not be here.
But it's so true, though. It's so true, right? I mean, you're responsible for managing a brand. Guess what? You got to be culturally relevant. You have to maintain the essence of the brand. That's your responsibility as a marketer.
Right. You have, you have an activist investor now in your shareholder base. How much, how do you make sure the board has patience to nurture brands, how you just explained?
55 consecutive quarters of growth.
Yeah, put that in your pocket and smoke it, right?
Drop the mic.
Drop the mic.
And walk out. That's great. Yeah. No, but I mean, Bill Newlands and Garth deal a lot with Elliot. They've been, very good conversations. We have 2 new board members. Both, one's a current CFO, one's a previous CFO. Great guys. We had a chance to meet with them a number of times. So it's going well. It's going very well.
Right. Okay. So spirit-based RTDs, you see a future in that?
Yeah, I mean, we're working with Coke and Dan and the team on Fresca Mix. We're good results early on. It's early, right? There's a lot out there, as everybody talked about yesterday, flavors. Malika told me to tell everybody we are not coming out with an iced tea next year.
All right.
So we're going to let others do that, so no iced teas. But we're going to see, right? It's we have energy for flavored malt beverages. We look at, quite frankly, Chelada as a flavored malt beverage. We look at Agua Frescas as a potential flavored malt beverage. And we're introducing in the East next year, I know you wrote about it, is Corona Sunbrew, which is citrus cerveza. Yeah. We're excited about. So we think the consumers like flavor, but we're going to do it our way through line extending off of our master brands and testing and learning, like a brand called Shift and a couple other things in smaller markets.
Right. Yeah, that Chelada is a sleeper. It's really it's crept up on me. It's like a 20 million. Yeah. I mean, that's
and growing double digits.
Unbelievable.
But it takes time, though, right? We started in 2010 with one SKU.
Yeah. How important will inorganic growth be in the Constellation's future?
We said at Investor Day, we're very, very comfortable over the next 5 years delivering top line, bottom line, right? However, starting to think longer, right? Starting to think 5, 7, 10, 15, right? So, what does it look like 10 years from now? So we're keeping our eyes open. We're having a lot of good discussions internally on what do we do going forward. But right now, we feel very confident we'll be able to deliver on what we shared at Investor Day with the street.
Right. Where does New Holland fit in the portfolio priority? I don't know what that means.
Me either.
Okay. Well, if neither of us know, then I think this might have been meant for another speaker.
I guess so.
It's probably left over from yesterday, actually. What about that's so typical. I think it was stuffed in the couch.
Jordan brought up a note for you yesterday. You never saw it. It was behind you.
Oh, it was?
Yes, it was.
Oh,
Jordan,
okay.
right? You did it, right? You brought it up.
Okay, well, we'll get that person back up here because there's a question unanswered.
Right.
How important? What about hemp or THC beverages? Y'all had quite a run there with what was it called in Canada?
Canopy.
Yeah. $1 billion ain't what it used to be, though, right?
Yeah. Look, if it goes off Schedule 1 to Schedule 3, if it becomes federally permissible, we are their largest investor. Hopefully patience with federal government. So. Right. But up in Canada, we do have, THC beverages up there, but it's sold in dispensaries. Yeah. You can walk in a dispensary and to find a beverage, you got to look this way and that way and find a little refrigerator, and there's some limits on how much you can buy.
Right.
So,
small business.
Who knows? That's another future,
yeah.
5, 10, 15 years from now.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Jim, for being up here. I really
appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, folks, we're already planning for the 2025 Beer, Wine, and Spirit Summit to be held at the Breakers in Palm Beach, Florida, January 12th through the 14th, 2025. Be sure and mark that on your calendars, and we'll see you there.